Good morning on this Sunday, August 15th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. The cases of COVID-19 continue to rise as school systems grapple with unhappy parents on both sides of the debate over restrictions. Also, census numbers are in, and Georgia is a lot more diverse than it was 10 years ago. What does that mean as legislators redraw district maps? Also, questions remain over the companies chosen to provide medical marijuana to thousands of Georgia patients. Phil, Theron, Kathy, Martha, they're all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
As COVID cases continue to rise in Georgia thanks to the Delta variant, Georgia leaders across the state are trying to come up with ways to combat the virus.
This is very serious. It's a matter of life and death, and it's a matter of making changes to fight this epidemic, this pandemic.
Fulton County could be the first county in Georgia to mandate employees get the COVID vaccine or be tested every 48 hours. Just over half of Fulton County's employees are vaccinated, despite being offered $150 incentives to get the shots. Meanwhile, in Cobb County schools, where masks are optional, thousands of parents signed a petition for a mask mandate.
But for some reason, the majority of board members are okay with this mask optional policy, which is allowing people to send their kids to school without masks and potentially spread the virus to other kids.
Mask opponents also turned out in Cobb County, saying that parents should have the option to decide what's best for their kids. Phil, we'll start with you this week because there's really no easy answer here for schools.
Well, it is complex, but I do think that the optional mask policy is still a good one at this point. And as we've always said, I think all the panelists agree that this is something that you need to be talking about with your primary care physician, what's best for you. We've talked in the past about age 55 and over really ought to be thinking about getting the vaccine. And now, of course, we have news reports saying that this new variant might be hitting people more so under age 55. And so I think that's very important. I think vaccinations are the key. I think the argument for masks, anti-masks, are really a diversion because I think that we talk about Georgia having a low vaccination rate. It is coming up. But we really have neglected the African American demographic. They really need to step it up, along with, yes, some white Southerners. I think those are two groups that need to be targeted and look at vaccination rates going up.
Theron, weigh in here. I mean, there is a lot of emphasis on masks. Is it too much and not enough on vaccines?
I think it's got to be an all of the above approach, Lori. I mean, at this point, I disagree respectfully with my friend Phil. I think that everyone should wear masks, particularly when you're indoors. And, we can sort of take this optional approach, Lori, but literally in this country right now, kids are dying. We saw in some counties in Georgia, first week, second week of school, teachers, students are actually, testing positive for COVID-19. And so I think the faster we get to a point where we are wearing masks, the faster we're going to be able to get control of this this spread and this new norm that we have to live in. And then lastly, I do agree with Phil on this. I was very stunned to see the numbers in the African American community, Lori, that is really high of unvaccinated Georgians. And so he's right. Southerners in rural areas in Georgia definitely need to get vaccinated, but we have a lot of African Americans who are not vaccinated, and I have a lot of friends who are now suffering from not being vaccinated because they've actually caught COVID-19. And the thing that they're most scared about, Lori, is do they give it to their spouse or their children?
All good points, guys. Thanks. Martha, this week, many hospitals went into an almost crisis mode, diverting some patients to other facilities because of the rising COVID case numbers. Governor Kemp is urging folks to talk to their doctor about getting the vaccine if they don't trust the government. Is there anything more the governor should be doing?
No, I really think that that's what you have to do. You have to talk within your own communities. People are very distrustful right now. I had a guy say to me the other day, well, my primary care doctor works at Emory and they're not allowed to tell me anything other than the vaccine is good. I think that we've got to get more people vaccinated, and we also need to look at the Hispanic community. They're having the same kinds of issues where this misinformation about chips being inserted with the vaccine and all this kind of crazy stuff is happening. So, people people should get vaccinated. I still think it should be mask optional because I think that the data is not conclusive on the mask being worn. But if you look at long-term data, and Georgia is doing a much better job than it's getting credit for, because if you look at the cases per million, we're in the middle of the pack, even though we are one of the largest states in the country. So we're doing something right things here. We need to continue it.
Kathy, I'll let you weigh in here on what the governor should be doing, but also this week, Music Midtown took the unusual step of telling festival goers either show proof of a vaccine or a negative COVID test if you want to get in the gate. Do you think that's a smart move?
Well, I think it's a smart move, but I think large gatherings like Music Midtown are probably not appropriate for the moment. But be that as it may, it's going to happen. I mean, you know, even if you have a vaccine and or a COVID test, that doesn't mean at the moment you're at the show you're not exposing people. But it's the best we can do right now with the tools that we have. But let me be clear, we are not doing well in the vaccine department. There was a study released recently ranking the states. Yet again, Georgia is last in the increase in COVID vaccines since this latest spike. We are down 20% over about a month ago in terms of vaccines people are taking. So, you know, in my mind, the governor has just not even tried. Not even tried. You know, we talk a lot about the economy. We talk about returning things to normal. We've got to do all of the things, right? People have got to get vaccinated. Mandatory vaccinations, I think, are not out of the question. Contact tracing, which we don't do, has to happen. And people need to wear masks. You will get COVID without a mask. You might not get COVID with a mask. So, you know, putting kids in schools together is going to be hard, even with masks, to keep kids safe. But we've got to do what we can do, or we're going to be doing this time next year as well.
Phil,
with
you've got your
different
hand
variants that might not be vaccine.
Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Let me just give a footnote, the other side of the coin to what Theron was saying about the kids. I did a quick call on Friday morning to a friend of mine who's a doctor over at Children's Healthcare, and he says, you know, there's very few COVID cases here. We're getting a lot of kids coming in with the flu and normal cold symptoms, but he said, right now we're not seeing that. So I think we need to keep looking at the data with regard to young kids.
All right, we could talk about COVID.
Can I just speak to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I got to speak to that. Listen, I got a young friend who's 8 years old. I want to give a shout out to him right now. He just got out of the hospital after being there for a week. Very, very sick with COVID. His older sister's been vaccinated. But this is not something you want to play around with. And reports that kids aren't getting sick is just simply not accurate.
Well, you know, I wanted to move on to another topic, but I know we're going to be talking about COVID for a long time. I think, Theron, you know, in all of the discussions and the political discussions around COVID, I think the one thing that is truly lacking is compassion for people on both sides of this debate. It seems everybody is willing to attack the vaxxers and the non-vaxxers and those who want the masks and those who don't want the mask. That doesn't get us anywhere.
And that was, Laura, you can read my mind. I was going to sort of take this conversation in a different direction. I think Governor Kemp, Mayor Bottoms, CEO Michael Thurman, Rob Pitts, Mayor Hardy Davis, Mayor Van Johnson, these are all over the state, Representative Calvin Smyre. We all need to come together as leaders. And this COVID-19 and this vaccine need is bipartisan. We got to stop the political pandering and posturing for elected purposes. And what I think that the governor should do is go back to where he was the strongest, and that is doing daily press conferences, Lori, updating the people of Georgia with real data, updating them with the science, and telling them sort of what he's doing, working with local leaders to make sure that we actually, you know, fight this deadly disease. And so I think you're right. Politicians have got to put their political agendas to the side right now and come together as one because the people need it.
Martha, I'll give you just 20 seconds to kind of wrap it up here.
Well, look, I think that what we have to do is follow the science, and we need to encourage everybody we know to get vaccinated. I've been vaccinated, but I'm also, to your compassion point, I have friends that don't want to get the vaccination for various reasons. And what I do is like I do any other time. You're compassionate about it. You keep suggesting it. You're not obnoxious about it, and you can convince a few people. And if we do that, we'll win.
Yep. Just to reiterate, we're all vaccinated here on the show. Coming up, new numbers are in when it comes to Georgia's census count as lawmakers get ready to redraw district lines.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Well, let's discuss Georgia's new census numbers because there's a lot to discuss. The state's population grew by 10% to 10.7 million people. But here's the breakdown. The number of African Americans jumped by about 13%. The white population fell 1%. The state's Asian population grew by 53%, and the Hispanic population increased 32%. Martha, I'll start with you. Do you think this could spell trouble for Republicans?
No, I think that it is important for us to look at who is voting. And you saw in the last election that there were more African Americans and Hispanics that voted Republican. So I don't think it spells trouble. I do want to know and dig a little deeper into what they defined as urban versus rural, because I live in an area of Georgia where we are at our own MSA. Is that urban or rural? So I want to dig more into these numbers. And I do think there were lots of challenges. I'm not saying the numbers are wrong. I trust the numbers, all of that. But there were a lot of challenges in getting these numbers to press, if you will. So it'll be very interesting to see how they'll play out. And I hate to say I'm looking forward to 2030, but hopefully we won't have a COVID outbreak at the time we're doing the census.
All right, Kathy, legislators will be drawing new congressional districts along with state house and Senate districts based on these numbers. And Republicans, though, are in charge. So what do you think?
Well, I think over the last several decades that redistricting has been sort of mutually assured destruction by both parties in terms of, how we're impacting our democracy. And some of the divisions that we're seeing right now are because now, and again, this has just been increasing. It's Democrats did it too, so I'm making a nonpartisan statement here. When we have districts that have too many of one party in them, we have people who only want to listen to one side of the story, and that has increased the divisions that we see in this country. The best thing that could happen for everybody is that people are in competitive districts and they have to listen to everybody and earn the support of everybody. And I think that would talk us off our ledges a good bit. I don't see that happening, but I wish that was what was happening, and I wish as Democrats and Republicans we could join together to insist on it.
Phil, give me your analysis on these numbers.
Well, that's a nice sentiment, but like Kathy says, it isn't going to happen because you have to adjust all of these districts, like you point out, Lori, from congressional districts all the way down to city council and county commission to make them fit. And while you don't want to cut up neighborhoods, the Democrats did it, and now it's the Republicans' turn to keep power. And so when you look at congressional districts, the Republicans want to probably take back the 6th district where Lucy McBath is the incumbent. And if you look at the numbers, it's very interesting where Democrat Sanford Bishop is the incumbent U.S. representative in his Southwest Georgia district. That actually could flip. All of this is the art of map drawing, and so it'll be very interesting. And you don't have to go to the U.S. Justice Department anymore to get approval. There'll be court suits, but you don't have to go through the Biden Justice Department. Thank God for the Republicans.
Farron, you and I worked on the census during these challenging times. What did you think of the breakdown of these numbers?
Well, Lori, I think it's what we saw very early on in our work. We knew we were going to see a significant increase in the 29 counties in the MSA, as Martha mentioned. One of the stats that was very, sort of surprising to me is not that it actually happened, but just the significance of the number. 10 years ago, the 29 counties in the MSA was a majority white. Now is actually majority minority, and it's been an influx of African Americans that have been moving into the metro area, particularly in places like North Fulton up in Johns Creek. But in the rural areas, and Phil just pointed out something, people like Sanford Bishop and others, you've seen sort of a decrease in that. So I think the one thing I want to say is that I do believe that these numbers are accurate. I know that the governor's office and a lot of complete count committee members work very hard to make sure these people got counted. But I do think that Georgia is on the verge of being a majority state. I mean, we're almost there based on these numbers now, but I predict, as Martha mentioned, in 2030, we definitely would be a majority minority state by then.
All right, I want to move on because critics are speaking out against conditions at Georgia's prisons across the state, saying understaffing is leading to record numbers of homicides, suicides, and riots. And the Southern Center for Human Rights describes the conditions at Arendelle. They're just horrific for the women that are housed there. Kathy, your thoughts on this topic?
I'm just really grateful for the Southern Center for Human Rights and the work that they're doing to monitor conditions at the prisons across the state, because nobody thinks that prison ought to be a walk in a park, but people shouldn't fear for their lives. They should have food that's edible. They should be, housed in places that are clean and sanitary. And that's not happening in Georgia prisons. And we should just not have that, right? We're going to risk, if you don't even have a humanitarian concern about that, the cost to the taxpayers of Georgia to rectify these situations is going to be enormous, because we don't keep up with these things. And so, I'm thankful for them. I'm thankful for people who are bringing attention. But ultimately, the General Assembly and the governor have got to budget money and take care of this problem. And again, I hope people hold them accountable.
Martha, it's hard to get people to work at restaurants and shops, and the prison system is obviously feeling, this high turnover rate. There were incentives out there, like 10% raises, but what else can the state do to help alleviate this problem?
Well, it is a culture, and in many places now, in full disclosure, my husband is the medical director at the Hall County Detention Center. So we run a business that handles correctional medicine. It's not a state prison, but it is county prison. So I want to be fully disclose that. But it's got to be more than an entry-level position. Many times what happens is that the person that works in the jail is entry-level to the rest of the law enforcement system that is managing that, or the prison. And so that needs to be looked at. Also, this is a problem throughout detention centers as well as the prison system in Georgia. There is not enough mental health care. My husband sees patients every single day. The psychiatrist comes maybe once a month, something like that. So there has to be more. And we've got a new program where we're getting more care there and that kind of thing. But the mental health part of that, as we see in the rest of our society, is a big part of this, and we don't have enough of that. So I think you cannot look at the overcrowding and the violence and that kind of thing without addressing the mental health issues related.
I think we can all agree on that. Thanks, everybody. Coming up, the long-awaited list is out of the companies authorized to grow and distribute medical marijuana in Georgia, but several people are protesting the decisions. We'll discuss.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
I want to spend just a little bit of time on this because it's been a long wait for Georgia patients who rely on medical marijuana. The Georgia Access to Medical Cannabis Commission chose its list of companies to distribute the oil, but 15 of the 69 companies that applied have filed protests over the selection process. Kathy, there doesn't seem to be a lot of information about the companies chosen. What do you think?
Well, I agree. I've been talking about this for a while now, about my concerns about this process. And when they announced the companies that came out, I just tried to find them. And most of the companies that got selected have never been in this business before. And who knows how they ended up getting the contracts. Former state representative Alan Peake, who worked very hard for years to make this happen, was no surprise to me that he wanted a contract and he didn't get one. And so I think we've got an interesting situation. Here's the problem. When Republicans talk about Democrats wanting socialism, but then create an industry that will create millionaires and only 6 people get licenses, 6 companies, you've got an incredible manipulation of the market. There should be regulations, but anybody who can meet that test ought to be able to be in the business.
Yeah, and there should be transparency. I want to move on because we got one more major topic here. Moving on, the voting record of the wife of potential Senate candidate Herschel Walker. Now, the AJC reports although the couple lived in Texas, she voted in Georgia's election back in November. Martha, what do you make of this?
Well, ignorance is not a defense, and she said she thought because she owned property in Georgia that she could vote by absentee ballot in Georgia. You can't, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm a Republican and I want Republicans to win, but this is not good. And they need to come out now and give a more full-throated explanation, not wait until he decides whether he's going to run or not.
Theron, could this be problematic for Republicans?
Laura, are we really talking about Herschel Walker again on this show? This is probably the most. No. And the point I'm making is, it just makes my claimed last week, and I've been saying it on different, other outlets, that I think that Herschel Walker actually needs to strongly reconsider running for office, because clearly he's off to one of, I think, the worst starts. And if his spouse voted in Georgia because they own property here, and I think Martha said it best, but first and foremost, Herschel Walker's got to answer the simple question: are you and your wife permanent Georgia residents? And if you are, prove it. And if you're not, then you can't run for office. It's really that simple. And so I just think that he's off to a bad start.
Oh, Phil, you're chuckling. What does this say, though, about the fight over election fraud? Walker once tweeted to play by the rules when it comes to elections.
Well, you're right, Lori, but let me point out something that Theron and Kathy won't like, and the Democrats won't like. A Democratic pollster just polled the other day, and I don't know how accurate it is, but this is a Democrat, saying that basically Herschel Walker and incumbent Raphael Warnock are neck and neck. And so naturally the Democrats are going to try to magnify or attack or smear Herschel. Now, this is a rookie mistake. And of course, Democrats have made rookie mistakes. Raphael Warnock made rookie mistakes when he first but I do agree with Martha, and this needs to be explained. You always have to say, I've made a mistake, and we're correcting it. I think voters are forgiving if you just say that. So that would be my my unsolicited advice to Herschel Walker, who I think is still going to announce any day. Theron, sorry, I know you don't like to hear that.
Kathy, you got some unsolicited advice for Herschel Walker?
Well, I'd say fess up and don't run, but if he wants to run, that's the best thing Democrats can hear, quite frankly. It may be neck and neck in terms of name recognition, but this time next year, it won't be neck and neck if he's in the game.
All right, Martha, you had your hand up.
Well, and I think, too, as far as the residency thing, if you check with the Secretary of State's office, it's 1 year before you would take office for the office that you're running for. So he's got really until the end of the year to be able to make this decision. I've talked to people very close to him, and they say he is still making his mind up. My view of that is, if you're still thinking about it and making your mind up, then you probably aren't going to run. So we'll just see what happens. But you're right. The name recognition thing is very high, but it doesn't always mean you'll win if you have high name recognition.
All right. We'll leave it there, everyone. Thank you. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Phil, we'll start with you this week.
All right, that sounds good. I have to commend as a winner Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis. She was in Sandy Springs the other day. She held a anti-gang public safety summit. All of the chiefs came from around Fulton County. Even Atlanta's police chief stuck his head in, and hopefully he learned something. But the whole point was more coordination between prosecutors and police to get the gangs and these dangerous thugs off the streets. And I also have to say that Theron and I would probably make as our winner Transportation Commissioner Russell McMurray. We met with him this past week, and Democrats, Republicans, and everybody in between, I think, wants better infrastructure. And so I'll make him the winner. But my loser is that driver that slammed into the bridge on I-16. He was driving without a license. Unbelievable.
Truly was. All right. Theron, over to you.
I definitely agree with Phil that Commissioner McMurray definitely is doing a great job. And by the way, he did pay for the lunch, Phil, so we'll make sure we put that in there for ethics purposes. But on a little bit of sad news, I want to definitely send my condolences to the family of Kelly Jackson, a very well-respected communications marketing guru in this state, and definitely want to send my condolences to her family. And also Margaret Kaiser, who's a former state representative, her husband, Eric Kaiser, passed away. So definitely want to extend my condolences to the Kaiser family. And then lastly, thank you to Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff and all the senators who voted to pass the infrastructure bill. I think we're heading in the right direction.
Okay, Martha?
Well, my winner this week is Kirby Smart because football training started, and so it's just a few weeks to go until Georgia football starts. also my winner is I've probably talked to dozens of Georgia-based military folks over the last 20 years since 9/11, and with all the news coming out of Afghanistan this week, I just want to say they're all heroes and make them all winners. I can't name them all, but they know who they are. And finally, this may not seem like it relates to Georgia, but Ella French was a police officer in Chicago who was gunned down this week. She was part of one of those reimagining police work units that the Chicago Police Department is putting together. A great service, a great loss. 29 years old, had just come back from maternity leave. We need to be serious about policing, or else we're going to have a lot more things like this happen.
Absolutely. Kathy, over to you.
My winner this week is Atlanta Council member Carla Smith. She voted against the location of the new Atlanta Police and Fire Training Facility in the 150 acres of city-owned proposed parkland. She supports the training facility, as do I, but we have other locations that would be better than a place where we were trying to expand our green space. My loser is Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger for calling for a constitutional amendment to prohibit people who aren't citizens from voting. That's already illegal. This is just a campaign ploy to get out people to vote in November next year.
All right, and those are both topics we'll be discussing over the next few weeks. So thanks, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again next week. Make it a great one.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.